world traveler went missing in the mountains near my town. Don't try to find her no matter how much they offer. This story I'm about to tell you is 100% real, and it comes from the area that I live in. My town is not rural, but it's not big, and we are surrounded by mountains. By word of mouth, there were particular places in these mountains that are forbidden places. Not because they are owned by anyone, but just because of the mystery that sprouts out from them. My city is hundreds of years old, and it has so many different cultures mixed into it that we have a good amount of ghost stories as well. This one true story of a person who has gone missing in one of these areas is one that still scares me every time I hear it, because it makes no sense. To this day, you are still able to see the plaque of this missing person strung up on a tree off the side of an old dirt road that my family and I ride our ATVs on. On the plaque, they offer money to the person who could find her body, which is still up there. The area she went missing in, or at least the road, is called the Devil's Pass, but I'm not for sure on this. I've heard other people refer to it like this, but it may not be its official name. So let me tell you why her disappearance is so strange. She was a world traveler and had gone to every continent, so she had to have been good with maps. Also, according to her children, she had been to the destination she was trying to get to before, which was off of a paving road. Somehow, she ended up pulling off of the paved road onto an old, rocky dirt path, which leads into the forbidden territory. At night is mainly when the area is supposedly dangerous to be in, and I have only been there during daylight hours, and I never left the road. However, there is a feeling of being watched while you are in this area, and it just has an unsettling presence. Or this might just be because of all the stories I've heard behind it that makes me paranoid of it. Anyway, the lady for some reason didn't stop and just kept on going. She ended up getting high-centered and couldn't drive anymore according to the police report. Now some of you are going to say that she was drunk and that's why she kept on driving in the middle of the woods, and the police thought the same thing, until the woman's daughter informed them that she had called her mother while she was driving there. Before she lost the phone signal, her daughter had told them that when they had talked, she sounded perfectly fine, and that she wasn't slurring her words at all. So to continue with the story, the woman gets out of her car and checks to see if there was any way to get unstuck. It was a rainy summer night, and when the cops arrived at the crime scene, they could see her footprints. They never left the perimeter of the car also, but for some scary reason, she was nowhere to be seen. They brought out forest rangers, volunteers, and even dogs to find her. The dogs never tracked her scent any farther than 10 feet from the car. It was as if she vanished off the face of the earth. Her body is still up there, and it's been around 25 years since it happened. And yet, there's still no sign of her. The award of finding her body still stands though, which is more than $1,000, but I would never try it. That area is not meant to be gone into, let alone searched. No one knows why it's cursed in my town, but the stories date back to the early 16th century when it was first settled. I'm scared actually of sharing this story. If you talk about the area a lot, bad things seem to happen to you. I'm not superstitious about much unless it involves this place. I was going to go camping close to that area with a bunch of friends from high school, but when I told my mom, she without hesitation said no. It was a no that didn't matter under any other circumstances because it would not change. I'll finish by saying that there are things in this world that shouldn't be explored, and this happens to be one of them. Tragedy is an odd thing. Everyone handles it differently. People love to say, if this happened, I'd do this, I'd do that, etc. But I can guarantee that unless someone has been through tragedy, they don't know. Not truly. So when my best friend Ricky passed away from a mugging gone south, despite always being a go-getter who liked to believe I could get through anything, I found myself in my room moping every day away. The culprit has yet to be caught, which only makes things worse. Ricky deserved better than getting stabbed in the alley behind our complex. He had a promising future in computer tech and would never bring harm to anyone in his path. February 8th is a date forever etched into my mind. Sure, there'd come a day where I'd have to leave the apartment we shared, but I wasn't ready for that yet. We were best friends basically since we could walk. He was always a smart guy. I could ask him for advice on anything, and he'd have the words. I had no clue how I'd carry on, knowing I had no longer had him around. I know that sounds selfish. I was lucky to have a comfortable job that allowed me a 2-week paid leave to regain my bearings. I'm 20 by the way. Outside of work and home, I really didn't have much going on in life. All this is to say that my world crashed when all of this unfolded. Now, on to why I'm writing this. The first week after his passing, I didn't notice much. With the recent events, I now realize how much I had overlooked this as a tired imagination. It started with scratching on the walls. We lived in an apartment. This wouldn't be strange or uncommon. What made it strange was the fact that the scratching mostly came from the wall between mine and Ricky's room. I'll give a brief layout of the apartment for the sake of its importance. It was a 2nd-story apartment in a 5-story building. It was on the far end of the hall with 8 other apartments on the floor. This meant it was a corner apartment. Upon entering, you would be in the living room, which was joined by the kitchen to the left in an open floor plan. On the side of the kitchen was a hallway with a bathroom to the left and our rooms to the right. Mine first, his second. Laundry was shared by everyone on the floor in a room all the way on the other side of the building. Simple enough, right? The scratching couldn't come from another apartment because my room didn't border any. This alone wouldn't raise any suspicions to me. I'd have to be crazy to assume it was a ghost or anything of that nature. Figuring it was either my imagination or the heater, I didn't think much of it. Each night for that first week, the scratching became more constant. By that 7th night, it took everything I had in me to fall asleep. I'm sure you all know how much harder trying to fall asleep makes falling asleep. This is where things took a major turn. I woke up, or at least I thought I did. I couldn't move my body, but my eyes were wide open. It felt like the room was shaking, and the sound of static filled my ears. At this moment, I didn't know what I was experiencing. Trying to break free, my gaze shifted to my right. What I saw shook me to my very core. There was a creature. It was completely fizzed out, like a humanoid made out of static. The sound I was hearing seemed to be radiating from this being. This thing was scratching something into the wall. There were words everywhere. I didn't have much time to analyze, but the words spelled trapped, help, where, and so much more. I then lay down around 10 p.m. and sleep took me rather quickly. Once again, I was brought into sleep paralysis. Same scenario, same everything. The humanoid was writing on the wall, and I watched as he wrote the word, what, to follow up his previous message of not. Despite my terror, I tried to read more of what was on the wall. Words like Ricky damned, Astro, and various other words are what I recall. I snapped out of it once the creature finished his new edition. I awoke and flipped out of bed from the resistance I was trying to gain from staring any longer. Same thing as yesterday. 7 a.m. Sun shining. Everything was so similar. It felt like Groundhog Day or something. Great. 2 nights in a row. I'm already dealing with enough, and my mind picks now to become unhinged. They say when it rains, it pours. That saying couldn't be any more true. I didn't want to entertain this insanity I was clearly delving into, but what else did I have to eat my day away? I grabbed out my laptop once more. Astral was the only word I did not recognize. A simple Google search told me some interesting information. Astral is, and I quote, relating to a supposed non-physical realm of existence. to which various psychic and paranormal phenomena are ascribed, and in which the physical human body is said to have a counterpart. This was something. How was it that a word I had never heard of fit so closely with the description of my experience? Maybe I could have heard the word before, and this was all my mind playing some crazy tricks on my subconscious. But this was crazy. Also, what does it mean by counterpart? I dug deeper. I read up on the astral realm for the whole day. How to gain access. I left no stones unturned. I was drawn in. Sleep paralysis is said to be a gateway to this realm. If I could stay calm and try to separate my soul from my physical being, I might be able to get answers from this demon. It had to be a demon. This was all making too much sense in my crazed mind. The gears were turning. Up until this point, I wasn't sure if this creature had ill intent. Maybe it was trying to warn me. A strong maybe, but with how my life is going right now, it was a risk I was willing to take. I went to bed at 10 p.m. again. It didn't take long to be in sleep paralysis, with the same scenario playing out for the third time. It was etching a line going straight down when my vision gained focus. I remembered the steps. I calmed myself, tried lifting myself from my center. It seemed to be working, until I heard a noise. It was like the demon was surprised. It let out a shriek, high-pitched. Almost like it was excited. This made me lose focus and brought me back to square one. It continued writing the word it, and I awoke to, well, you get it by now. Damn it, I was so close. Once the adrenaline wore off, it hit me like a ton of bricks. This was for real. Something was happening here, and I wasn't crazy. Is it wrong to say? I felt some relief. This was going to take some critical thinking. What if I fell asleep on the couch and attempted astral projection from there? This time, I laid down and fell asleep around 9 p.m. I awoke once again in sleep paralysis. Scanning my surroundings, the demon wasn't present, and neither was the static. I used the tactics I had read about, and had nearly no problem exiting my body. This was unreal, almost like it was meant to happen. I crept towards my room. Standing outside the door, I heard frantic scratching. I knew what was on the other side. I went to open the door, but my hand went right through. I walked through the doorway. The demon turned towards me and put his arms up. Imagine making the C in YMCA. He wanted me to read the wall. The last word was seems. Not what it seems. I read out aloud. Nothing is. The demon spoke. This wasn't something I expected. What does that mean? I asked. It means exactly what it reads. Nothing is what it seems. Your world, it's shaped by things most will never see. The demon said. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wondered if this was all a nightmare. Surely a demon would never present itself to me like this. The demon spoke again. You have a choice. I have been assigned to you. If I die, I return to hell, and later get assigned to someone else. Your negative energy has fed me sufficiently, but I ache for more. You can kill me, and I will leave. If you don't, I will haunt you forever. But understand, if you let me stay, I can work miracles. I will grant you one miracle of my choosing. We could be a team. But this decision is yours. Just remember, it's not what it seems. What do you mean by haunt me? I asked. No fun in ruining the surprise. All you have to do is place your hand in my chest and pull out my heart, and I will be gone, he said. I inched closer to him. What will happen? I asked, but he was done speaking. I didn't want to be haunted for life by this thing. Who knows how he'd torture me? I placed my hand in his chest. The grin on his face widened. I gripped only the solid mass I could find and pulled. I awoke the police sirens. Glancing out my window, I realized they were coming from the back alley. I ran outside to see what was going on. Ricky's body was surrounded by detectives. Date of death, 7 a.m., February 8th. One of them spoke. This couldn't be happening. Did I travel back in time? I pulled out my phone and confirmed. It was February 8th. I cried the same way I did nearly 2 weeks ago. I spoke to the officers on scene and went back to my apartment after countless questions. You see, I believe we all have demons, and if you kill yours, you'll have to live with yourself. Ricky was always a good friend, so close that an entity would use him to get me. The demon must have assumed I'd take his offer of a miracle. I didn't know, and now my best friend is still dead. The deal with the demon presented was rotten from the beginning. Not what it seems. Demons are tricky. They found a way into my head and played his games. There are many things I still don't understand, but the one thing that eats away at me every night is, who won? Did I fall right into his hands? Perhaps when I destroyed the demon, I took something physical with it. What makes me think that, you ask? What would you think if you found a bloody knife in your kitchen sink? My great-grandfather was part of the French army during World War I. Since he died young, I never actually got the chance to meet him. My father had always told me that he was quite a reserved man. In fact, he had essentially become a shut-in during the later stages of his life. This wasn't always the case, but I suppose war does that to a person. This trend continued on throughout the rest of my family history. My grandfather died in World War II, and my father was part of the Vietnam War. He also died recently. It was a premature one, stemming from years and years of alcohol and tobacco consumption. After the funeral's reception, I visited the house that I grew up in, just for old time's sake. As I walked into my old room, I found a worn-out looking journal sitting on my nightstand with a note attached to it. To Jack, I know that you've never met your great-grandfather before, and you probably don't know much about him. It's time to change that. This journal belonged to him. Open it to where I've inserted the bookmark and read until the last entry. As you go on, you may consider it to be ramblings of a madman, but I assure you that he was of sane mind when he wrote this. It's time for you to know what he really went through. This kind of thing can't be forgotten. If you're reading this, that means I've passed on, and that's exactly how I planned for this to be. I never wanted to tell you this myself. Despite this feeling of heavy melancholy weighing down on me, I decided to sit down and read the journal right there. I mean, this was essentially the last thing that my father had left me. I've translated the entries from French into English. This is what it read. December 4th, 1916. The Germans can't keep this up for much longer. I don't know when they're gonna call out the Verdun just yet, but I'm feeling that it must be soon. There's been too much bloodshed on both sides. I say with confidence that this battle must be coming to its demise, because they're taking some of us off the front lines. Not many, but just about 30. I'm part of that 30. The Lieutenant General is directing us towards a smaller village in the extreme north. We're confused as to why anybody would try an invasion from there, since the place apparently remains in a state of perpetual blizzard. The Germans must be freezing out there. I suppose that we'll find out soon. December 5th, 1916. We arrived yesterday to a massacre. The townsfolk, well not many to begin with, have all mostly been slaughtered. The few survivors have described the attack as somewhat strange, with the enemy being nearly entirely shrouded by the snow, and the gunfire seemingly coming from everywhere. However, we've been presented with a somewhat disconcerting revelation from one of the older survivors. He claimed that the entire time they were being bombarded by bullets, the air around them seemed to be filled with an unnatural shriek. Not the wind, mind you, but the air itself. The sounds weren't traveling along, but remained stationary, as if the sources were standing right outside their homes. We don't know what to make of this, because of the uncertainty surrounding this whole situation. We can't confirm this enemy yet, but we still have a pretty good idea as to who it is. They may be trying to draw troops away from the Verdun. However, can the Germans even afford it? Every side is running low on the manpower at this point. We've decided to move, as we think they may have headed south. We'll be leaving soon. December 8th, 1916. I've been sitting in the infirmary for a while now. Everybody keeps asking me questions that I can't answer. However, I suppose that I should write down what happened, even if I don't fully understand it myself. We moved later that day, not wanting to risk getting caught in the darkness. We must have trudged across the snowy plain for hours. We also had limited visibility, barely being able to see just meters in front of us. The only thing that we had were the directions coming from our general. An intermediate amount of time later, we started to hear the shrieking. I also don't speak in exaggeration when I say that it was no sound of this earth. Like the villager had described, the sources of the ungodly noises didn't seem to move. They were all around us, but didn't ever seem to shift in position or tone. And of course, we couldn't see anything. Everywhere we looked, we were met with walls of white. We started getting shot at only a few moments later. We all returned fire, but without any indication of where anybody was. We were essentially shooting blind. The incredibly worrying part was that our enemy didn't seem to share this problem. With no protection of the trenches, we were going down at an alarming pace. However, the assault eventually ceased. The shrieks had dissipated as well. Thinking that this meant the enemy was severely wounded and retreating, we pressed further on into the blizzard. About a few more minutes of southbound movement, and we were bombarded again. The shrieks were also back now. We fired in every direction, trying to reload in between magazines as quickly as we could. However, our hands were so frozen that we couldn't retaliate quickly enough. We were soon down from 30 to about 12. In the midst of the carnage, I could make out a shape, slowly staggering towards us to the snow. I must have emptied my entire clip into the entity, but it just wouldn't go down. The thing continued making its way towards us, despite now being fired at by all of our men. We could see chunks of flesh being ripped off, but it never seemed to be bothered. As it got to within about 10 meters of our formation, it stopped, and we could see it clearly. I suppose that you can call it human, but just barely. It was a man. stripped of all clothing, with skin that was charred to blackness all over. Except for the face, that is. His face was normal enough, save for a few bullet wounds in the temple. The man squatted down in front of us and began to grin, gesturing for us to come forward. I glanced at my fellow soldiers, and they all shared the same look of sheer terror as I probably did. At this point, the gunshots had ceased, but none of us dared to move towards the strange man. We stood there for what felt like hours, before the man's grin faded, and was instead replaced with an expression of sheer hatred. He opened his mouth wide and started shrieking. This time, it was so loud that we all had to cover our ears. It felt like our brains would explode if we didn't. I turned away for a second, looking back to see the man running away from us at a speed that should have been too fast for any normal human. But he was obviously not a normal human. We decided to turn back that instant. There was no way in hell that we were following that abomination of humanity into whatever gruesome fate it wanted to lead us into. We made the immensely difficult trek backwards, only to come across something that was definitely not there before. There were no pikes lodged into the ground, impaling German soldiers through the mouth. However, against all logic, they were still alive, flailing their arms and making desperate eye contact with us. We considered helping them, but there was really nothing we could have done. This was because the Birdman was also back, now standing at the bottom of one of the pikes. Again, he started motioning for us to come towards. I couldn't stand the sight of him, so I turned around. However, as soon as I did, the gunshots came back. I tried my best to avoid both the man and the bullets as I started running frantically through this snowy hell, trying to return back to the world that I knew. As grim as conventional warfare is, this was something else entirely. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually I found myself in another village where I was taken in. I couldn't locate the rest of my team, and as shameful as it sounds, I didn't really care. I was out of there, away from the gunfire, away from the shrieks, away from that man. Eventually, I was found and put into the infirmary for treatment. I was suffering from severe hypothermia as well as 3 bullet wounds. There was only one member of my unit who made it back with me. However, he was catatonic, unable to provide the officers with any semblance of what had happened to us. It's not that I was able to fare much better. I couldn't begin to describe the events that had just transpired either. In fact, I don't really want to think about it anymore. December 19th, 1916. I'm back in my own home now, being deemed unable to continue on in the war. I've just been informed that we won the Battle of Verdun. It's a sad victory for me. As much as I'd love to keep serving my country, I just can't risk running into that man again. You see, on my last day in the infirmary, I saw him. He was walking amongst the troops, but it was unquestionable. I'd never forget that face. He looked like a regular man, due to the fact that he seemed to have gained his skin back, somehow. But I know better than that. It's all just a trick. I tried telling my superiors about it, but they wouldn't listen. They think I'm insane. Maybe I am, but in any sense, I'm not going back out there. That thing is waiting for me. Hey guys, it's me, Lucid. If you've gotten this far, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and consider checking out my other content. I want to give a special thanks to Mr.Outlaw for writing this amazing story. I'll leave his info in the description below. But that's all for now. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, and I'll see you then. And as always, the dark is simply the answer. Sweet dreams.